Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Varun Sriram with Generation UCAN, and we are absolutely thrilled today to be joined by professional runner Sarah Sellers, the newest addition to Gen UCAN. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Vern.
It's a pleasure, and really excited here in the last couple of days to be able to officially announce that you're joining the UCAN team, Sarah. It's been something that has been in the works for a little bit, but want to take this chance to officially welcome you and really pumped to get a chance for our audience here who's tuning in live today on Facebook Live to get a chance to hear a little bit about your story. You burst on the running scene in a big way from the Boston Marathon, and a lot of people have had a chance to learn about your story because of that. But yeah, I just want to tell you one more time that we're super excited to have you as part of the team.
Yeah, I'm equal excited. Thank you.
Cool, Sarah. So let's start actually with talking a little bit about your Boston story. So this year at the Boston Marathon back in April, crazy day, tough conditions, rainy conditions. You kind of surprised everybody when the race ended, and the second place finisher was Sarah Sellers. How did that moment in Boston change your whole outlook on running and even your career in running?
Yeah, I think, initially right after the race, like it was just this whirlwind of like, I don't even know what's happening, and like just such an overwhelming response that now that it's been a few months, I think I've had time to like think of some goals and kind of move forward. So I think it really changed my outlook in terms of faith in myself and just faith in training consistently and training healthy. And I mean, distance running it's a long-term sport. So I can't, expect to suddenly run a 20-minute PR in the marathon, but I'm excited to kind of have a renewed perspective and excitement for the sport, and just realize like if I can stay healthy and just train consistently over time, that I can just keep getting better and hopefully achieve some cool things.
So if we can, let's rewind a little bit to 2017. What were you doing in mid-April 2017, a year before you finished second at the Boston Marathon? What were you doing on Marathon Monday that day?
I was finishing CRNA school, so nurse anesthesia school in Florida. I was cramming for boards. I definitely followed the marathon. I think I was at clinicals that day, so I wasn't able to actually watch the marathon. But I was still very much into running more from the spectator side, and also I was finally back to running more consistently. I still wasn't doing any speed workouts or anything, but I was finally be able to run most days without pain in my foot, and it's been a long time since that happened.
So for those of us, Sarah, that are in our audience that may not know your full story, you sort of alluded to it a little bit, but tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about that, and let's take it back and start from the beginning. First of all, how did you get into the sport of running? What's your background as a runner, and then take us through from that time to how you even got to Boston. What made it such that you were at the start line for the 2018 Boston Marathon?
Yeah, so I've been a runner my whole life. My parents were the ones that first introduced me to the sport. So my parents live kind of on the mountainside in Utah, and there's trails that run right through the backyard. So I kind of got into running and fell in love with, not even with racing, just with running and being outside and enjoying nature and pushing myself. And it was kind of racing came out of that when I realized like I'm running consistently, and there were some girls in my neighborhood that were pretty good runners, and I thought like they're racing. I don't know. I'm competitive, so I decided I wanted to kind of get into racing, and ran collegiately at Weber State University, and then kind of ended my career early with a injury, and it was kind of a long time, a few years before I was able to get back to running consistently, but I always felt like I left Weber on kind of a sour note, and I loved my teammates. I couldn't have asked for a better experience at Weber, but I felt like I let myself down. I felt like I let the program down. And I mean, it was due to an injury, which sometimes that's inevitable, but I really felt like, I wanted to see if I could have more of a positive ending to, or not even ending, but just a positive experience, and not end with all these unfulfilled goals and feeling like I let myself down.
So obviously, what you just told us, when your running career in college ended, you definitely felt like there was still more in the tank.
Yeah.
So how did you get to Boston? How did that all come about? Is that something that you had set as a goal, saying, I want to come back and run the Boston Marathon, or did it happen in a different way?
Yeah, so I always hoped that if I was ever able to get healthy and get back into running, I thought I would be a marathoner, simply because I'm not known for leg speed, and I feel like endurance is definitely my strength. So I always thought like I wanted to get into marathoning, and the only reason I picked Boston in particular was my little brother Ryan told me he wanted to run the Boston Marathon. He told me this the summer of 2017. He was running and training. I was also running. I wasn't doing any speed workouts or anything, but kind of last minute decided to sign up for the Huntsville, Utah Marathon. I actually, it's held, at least that year, was held on the last day you could qualify for Boston. I didn't do anything marathon training for it. I was just doing like some distance runs. But I ran the Huntsville Marathon, ended up running a time that placed me in the elite field at Boston. And I was actually shocked that I got into the elite field. I remember when Boston published the John Hancock field of the top women who would be there. They published that before I knew that I was even going to be in the elite field. So I was just planning on starting with the masses, and I didn't think I'd have the opportunity to be in the elite start.
That's really, really cool. So, going into that race, how do you set expectations for yourself? It's your first marathon. You're coming back from an injury. I remember being in Boston that weekend that everybody was talking about the weather at the expo. That was top of mind for everybody. You obviously have all these things, I'm sure, going into your head, being your first race, what you just talked about, also now running in the pro field. What were your expectations? What was your mindset going into that race in terms of what you wanted to get out of it for yourself?
Yeah, so I like to think, just to tell myself that I can never have, I call it freshman excuses. So I like to think that just because I'm new to, whether it was collegiate running when I was actually a freshman, or marathoning when Boston was my second marathon, just because I'm new to something doesn't mean I shouldn't expect the best of myself. So I had high expectations. I mean, I put in a hard block of training for Boston. And so when the weather report kept saying that it was going to be, this torrential downpour and crazy headwinds, like I just kept hoping and praying that it would turn around and that the headwind would be a tailwind. But when the weather forecast stayed what it was, I kind of just resigned myself to it's no longer about time, because my big goal going into Boston was a time goal. And I kind of had a place goal. I thought if I really had a spectacular race, top 15 would be pretty cool. 15th place is the last place that gets prize money. So I thought that'd be pretty cool, bragging rights to say I got prize money at Boston. And yeah, I think I just totally changed my strategy with the weather, and realized like it was about conserving and trying not to let the weather take it out of me, so I'd have something left at the end.
So at what point in the race, or was there at any point in the race, that you were aware of how well you were doing?
I mean, I knew passing some of the big names in the field that I was doing better than I expected, but at no point did I realize that I was even close to second place.
So when you cross the finish line, what's the gap between you crossing the finish line and you understanding what you've just accomplished?
I mean, as soon as I crossed the finish line, I immediately asked the volunteers at the finish line, like, what place am I? What place am I? And I think several of them the first few people that I asked is, I'm like, going forwards towards the finish chute kind of looked at me startled, like they didn't really know what to say to me. And then there was one official who ended up like escorting me through like the drug screening and everything. And she took me aside and she's like, "You were second." And she had to just keep repeating it because I was like, "I was not second. I don't know what you're talking about."
That's amazing. And, you know, for you coming in second place, I'm sure that changed things in a lot of ways. We've talked a little bit about kind of some of the changes in terms of just your running. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But
Yeah.
even in terms of just, you know, practical changes, like how has your life changed? Maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but was there any like few moments after Boston where you had to pinch yourself and be like, is this actually happening to me? I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first like run that I went on after Boston, back in Tucson, where it was back to my normal morning run before work, that was where it like hit me that it was like Boston's over and I got second at Boston. So, I mean, I think it's still like I don't think the shock factor will ever wear off for me because I think it really is like something that's I don't know that I'm ever going to fully accept what happened. It just still is surprising to me. But I think in terms of some of the changes that have happened since Boston, I've really tried to restructure my time and just give more emphasis to a lot of the little things that I was skipping, like strength training, nutrition, sleep, recovery. I feel like I was training for Boston. I was stretched pretty thin. You know, I just started a new job as a CRNA, and I was trying to fit in workouts around a lot of other things, and a lot of it was running was being deprioritized in a lot of ways, and I feel like I was setting myself up that if I continue that lifestyle, I'm going to end up injured, and all these goals are going to go away again. So just kind of restructuring to make time for all like the little supporting things that keep you healthy.
Now, would you say for yourself that the performance in Boston kind of put to the forefront that what you were just talking about, where you really needed to prioritize running and focus on the little things? Or is that something that you were already sort of building towards, even regardless of what happened at Boston? Is that something that you had kind of said, I want to do this, I want to really pursue this? Because you had talked about kind of leaving your college career with some regrets. So it sounds like the fire was still burning in you, you know, even outside of what happened in Boston.
Yeah, I think I'd say Boston is what turns good intentions into action because I always had good intentions of like, oh, I'm going to start getting 8 hours sleep and I'm going to start focusing on nutrition. And until like there was that catalyst of having like Boston happen and give some new opportunities, it had never panned out into actually making changes.
That's I like the way you said that. That's what you say? You said you turn good intentions into action. That's a good
Yeah.
that's a good motto. So Sarah, let's dive a little bit into that. I think like the way and what you have to do training for Boston is so relatable to so many folks in our audience who are trying to balance training for a marathon around, you know, their full-time jobs and their family responsibilities. There's a lot of what you went through that people could probably learn from or get ideas from. So give the folks in the audience like a sense of what was your daily your daily schedule like from a work standpoint, and based on that, how did you have to fit in training and some of these other little important things around that? What were some strategies you used, and how did you have to structure your days?
Yeah, so I really prioritize getting my runs in. Sometimes for better or for worse, sometimes for worse, because I think there were days when I would choose to do my double, and that meant getting 4 hours sleep instead of 5.5. And it wasn't every day like that, but I really tried to prioritize like this is my training schedule. Like nothing is going to get in the way of this. And like I said, I think there's a balance. Sometimes that's not healthy when you're when that means you're not getting sleep and not getting recovery. But that's what I chose to do for Boston was make sure my training happened regardless of anything else. And a lot of that meant so I worked 4 days typically a week. So on days that I worked, I was usually running twice. So I was typically, my morning run would be at 4, and my evening run would be like, depending on the day, like 6 or 8. And then the 3 days that I didn't work, I don't run Sundays, so one of those was a just day off, and then 2 of the days were kind of just trying to like clean up the hurricane of a house that I'd let happen for the other 4 days, and like get ready for the next few days of stretch of work.
Did you find when you were training and working at the level you were going into Boston, you just talked about right now focusing some more on the little things like sleep. I mean, were those things that just the reality were that you have to sacrifice some of the little things training for Boston, or do you feel like you were able to find a way to structure your days where you weren't sacrificing some of the little things?
I mean, I think I was somewhere in the middle. I think there were times that I was really setting myself up for injury, and I think I was, having had my collegiate career end on an injury, I think I was more cognizant that, when I am feeling a certain way and I'm getting this amount of sleep, it's probably like I'm setting myself up for another big injury. So I think I would try to back off. And so I think it was definitely a balance training for Boston. I think at the time, a lot of the hindrances to training, like having to do hard workouts after work or whatever it was, I think that actually played into success at Boston, because I think even from a mindset standpoint, I always considered my training for Boston that it was never ideal. And so when the conditions at Boston were far from ideal, it was like, this is kind of what I'm used to, and I'm just going to do the best I can with what's given to me.
Yeah, that's a really, really great perspective. I think you see so many times runners will get freaked out when everything isn't perfect, but
Yeah.
I think that's a great perspective from you. When everything isn't perfect in training, it kind of can open up your mind to everything not being perfect on race day. You were
Yeah.
talking about mental toughness, Sarah, and I think that's something that strikes me both from kind of the training schedule you were doing leading up to Boston, as well as, kind of some of the things you had gone through with injuries. It seems like kind of that mental toughness is part of your story. Do you have any like particular tricks, like, people, I don't know, there's mantras or people use different things. Do you have anything in particular, or 1 or 2 things that those days where you really didn't feel like running at 4 a.m. or it was a really long day of work and you didn't want to get in those miles after work, anything you did or do to help yourself push through that?
Yeah, I think there's a few tricks. I think one of them that's just hard is consistency. And I think when you set expectations for yourself, and then when you follow through on those expectations, like that creates a pattern of consistency and accountability where you realize, like, I committed that I'm going to get up at 4 to run. And then when your alarm goes off and like that's the last thing you want to do, like when you've built up a habit of like making, like I said, setting expectations for yourself and following through, I don't know, I think it just creates like an intrinsic mental toughness that you follow through on things that you expect of yourself. I think realizing that we're all human and that it's okay to dread getting up. Like, it's fine. You're going to dread it. It's never going to get easier. Like, when the alarm goes off, it's not going to feel good. And to realize, like, that's okay and that's part of it. And then to also realize that once you're up and going, like, it's always worth it. And I think, like I said, just the consistency of realizing that this is how it feels to get up at 4 a.m. and to hate life, but that goes away after 5 minutes and it's worth it. And then I think, like, after work, honestly, is where I struggle more than before work. Because especially if it's like been a long day at work, I haven't gotten the hydration that I needed or whatever it is. I think it's a big mistake that I would sometimes make is after work, I would come home, I would tell myself I'm going to have a snack, I'm going to sit down for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to go run. 5 minutes turns into like an hour and a half, and then all of a sudden, like, you're running late, you're getting less sleep. So I think a big key for me is if I'm running after work, I try to not come home. Like I bring my running clothes with me, and then you don't even have the option of sitting on the couch because you're like in the car with your clothes, and the only thing you can go do is run before you can go home.
That's a great practical tip, and sometimes it's as simple as that. And I think it's, it's nice for people to hear that, like, even really runners who are really high achievers like yourself, like you said, you wake up at 4 a.m. and hate life, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not all roses every day. You're waking up and like, oh, I want to attack this run. But I think what you said, once you're out there and you do it for a couple of minutes, all is good. It can get a lot easier right away.
Exactly.
You started talking, Sarah, about kind of in light of the workout structure and some of the things you deal with in training, even the whole fueling side of things. And I know now, as you're continuing this path of being a marathon runner, and we're going to talk here in just a couple of minutes about what's next for you in terms of the marathon. But as you've been exploring that, you've also been exploring nutrition and kind of what you need to tweak and improve from a fueling standpoint.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, how did UCAN become part of your training plan and what you've been doing? How did it come on your radar, and how do you find that it's helped you so far?
So I'd say I found out about UCAN from two sources. One, Meb, obviously, he's a hero of mine, and I think I knew that he used UCAN. And then also one of my teammates, Taylor Ward, she's a UCAN athlete. She's run a 2:35 marathon. She's run some really great races in the last couple of years, and she's really consistently used UCAN. And I think coming from, somewhat a medical background, like I think sometimes I don't put into practice a lot of the nutritional information that I know to be solid. And I think, like I was talking about with like trying to get better sleep, kind of where I've found UCAN to really fit in perfectly and to fill a gap that was missing in my training was for hard workouts in the morning. I usually try to have some type of carbohydrate about 3 hours before my workout. And I would be waking up, if I was going to do a hard workout at 4 a.m, I'd wake up at 1 or 2 to like have some snack, try to go back to sleep. I usually couldn't sleep that well. And then I'd get up for my hard workout. And the nice thing about using UCAN is that I feel like I get the same benefit as if I had gotten up 3 hours earlier, but it means that I can have it like a half hour before my workout and kind of get some more solid sleep. And then I think it's also been cool that I'm definitely not of the opinion that sugar is the evil of all mankind that's causing all the problems in the world. But I do think that as athletes, especially with a lot of traditional sports nutrition products, it's easy to consume kind of an insane amount of sugar that you're not even realizing. So I think it's really cool that UCAN is a very digestible carbohydrate that keeps your blood sugar at a stable level, and that you're not, unnecessarily having all this extra sugar that's dissolving your teeth. And I don't know. Again, sugar is not the most evil thing, but I think it's really cool that it doesn't have to be part of the equation for like a pre-workout nutrition.
Yeah, and I think one of the points, the first point you made too, which is just hearing the practical aspect of it. I think that mentality of like waking up several hours before a long run and trying to get some food in, it's such like a thing that a lot of runners are accustomed to doing, and it's kind of like something that's been accepted as a necessary evil, and that's probably like hard enough to do when you're trying to do your long run at 7 a.m. and eating at like 4 or 4:30. For you, doing your long run at 4 a.m., like you said, trying to eat something at 1 or 2 in the morning and go back to sleep, it can get kind of crazy. So I appreciate kind of that practical element of, being able to get up, being able to get that slow releasing carb source from UCAN, but something that won't sit heavy.
Yeah, exactly.
You talked a little bit about Meb, Sarah, and, Meb kind of was the first athlete to train with UCAN back in 2009. He was really where it all started. I know you mentioned him as being somebody that's one of the people that has inspired you. Who else have you sought inspiration from in your career as a runner? Either kind of in this next phase of your running career as you're really pursuing this professional element of it, or even in your early stages growing up as a runner, somebody that you looked up to? Are there any folks in running that have really inspired you?
Yeah, like I said, Meb is a huge one. I remember reading like a New York Times article about his win in Boston, and I honestly was like in tears. And like it was just so inspiring, and his background was so inspiring. And then Kara Goucher, I've looked up to her ever since I started running and started competing. So then when she like reached out to me on social media after Boston, like that was, I was just floored. Like that was just so cool. It just kind of speaks to her character of how she's trying to really promote a love for the sport and support others that are trying to achieve in the sport. And then I guess two runners that I trained with when I was in Utah, Taylor Ward, like I mentioned, who's run some great marathons. She's a great friend. And then Lindsay Anderson is an Olympian that also went to Weber State. She went to the Olympics in the steeplechase, and now she's coaching at College of Southern Idaho. And it's kind of cool because none of us right now are training together. Taylor trains in Utah, Lindsay trains where she coaches, and I'm training here in Tucson. We all still have the same coach, and it's just cool that we are all kind of shooting for some big goals, and I feel like we're training together even though we're all in different states.
Yeah, that's I guess kind of the beauty of technology in a way, is you can feel connected even when you guys aren't actually running next to each other. Still talk about your training, share information about your training, and still be able to get that community feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of Kara, I wanted to ask you something in terms of Kara Goucher, who you talked about. So correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't have the story right, but I believe she was kind of the one that encouraged you to join Twitter. So tell us a little bit about that after you won Boston. And your Twitter handle is Sarah Who Sellers. So what's the story behind that as well?
Yeah, I think probably the day after Boston, I think it was my husband or somebody told me that Kara Goucher had just like tweeted about me, and I'm like, are you serious? Like that can't be happening. And I can't remember what her initial tweet was, but then she sent like a follow-up tweet that was something like, I don't know, can we get Sarah Sellers to join Twitter? And like, I never in my life would have joined Twitter otherwise, like never. Yeah, I'm just not. I mean, I literally have, prior to Boston, I had never posted on Facebook, and I'd posted on Instagram once in my life. And like, I just was terrified of social media, and I'm kind of, I don't know. The thing that scares me is it's like, you're putting all this about yourself out there in the world, and then you don't get to see people's reactions really on a personal level. And so I don't know, but it's been really cool that I feel like it's been an opportunity to connect with people like Kara that I would never, I'm sure, would have had the opportunity to connect with. And then also just to kind of build some confidence and realize that this is who I am, and I'm going to put it out there for the world. And it's okay if like not everybody likes me or likes my social media. Like I realize that it doesn't actually matter, that I'm just going to be true to myself, and it's kind of a cool tool that's out there.
Is Sarah Who Sellers a little bit of a play on your unexpected finish at Boston? Is that where we're going from with that, or is there another?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's all. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool, Sarah. Well, we've got a couple minutes left. And in that time, I just want to take a look ahead. This week, there was some really exciting news in terms of what's next for you with New York Roadrunners announcing that you'll be part of a really, really strong field of women, and American women especially, running the 2018 New York City Marathon. So congratulations first off on that. Really excited for you. It's an incredible race, high energy, really a favorite, personally for me. We were talking about this before the call, but I was living at mile 7 of the marathon course for about 5 years, and always one of the best days to be in New York.
Yeah.
How about from your end? Tell us a little bit about what went into running New York, why you wanted to do it, and what are your thoughts about getting a chance to attack the marathon again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to be training for New York. in some ways, like the whole Boston experience again it's been really cool, but it's also like I'm not used to, I think, reflecting back on something for such a long period. Like I'm used to like setting a goal, working for the goal, and then as soon as I am past that point, like you move on with life. And I feel like in some ways, like I have been like desperate to be like moving forward again and just like working towards a big goal. So New York, I feel like is the perfect opportunity to throw myself in a crazy competitive field. Like I don't even, I'm floored at how competitive the field is. Like it's really just going to be, I get giddy thinking about like how blessed I am to even be on the start line with those women. It's, you know, I have some good goals for myself, obviously, for going into that race. But I think in college, there were a lot of times where I set some big goals for races. And then when I didn't achieve those goals, I really beat myself up. And I feel like I didn't really enjoy the process or the experience. And probably my biggest goal for New York is one, to stay healthy, and two, to enjoy the process. And as much as I like work for my goal and really sacrifice and put myself out there, I'm going to enjoy the experience no matter what happens, and just see what I can do.
Well, we're really, really excited to watch you in New York and
Thanks.
see how that goes for you. Sarah, we'll just take maybe one or two questions that we got on social media from the audience before wrapping this up. So we had a question from Nancy, who also has suffered stress fractures herself, something that you talked about going through, and she just wanted to know if you had any specific advice, either physical or mental, that you really leaned on to help you get through when you were going through those stress fractures.
So I think when you get diagnosed with a stress fracture, the first thing you do is like realize like what were the factors in your life that led to that. And it wasn't just, I think that stress fractures are multifactorial. I think nutrition plays a huge role in those. So I think stress fractures are an opportunity to kind of reevaluate health-wise where you are and say, okay, why was my nutrition off, my recovery off? Like, what was I doing that, because every day when we're running, we're creating microfractures in our bones. And in a normal, healthy process of recovery, you give yourself enough time and enough nutrition that those microfractures heal and you actually build your bone density. But with a stress fracture, and it can be a variety of reasons, those microfractures developed, you know, instead of healing them, they just built on top of each other until they actually created a fracture line. So that could be due to overtraining. It could be due to undernutrition, not recovering. But so I think it's the first thing you should do when you get that kind of diagnosis is take a step back and evaluate, like, not your first question, even though it's tempting, your first question shouldn't be, how do I get back to running as soon as possible? Like your first question should be, what factors led to this and how do I fix those? And then just focus on, you know, you can stay aerobically fit while letting your stress fracture heal. That usually means swimming or something non-weight bearing. But really your number one priority is going to be healing the stress fracture and figuring out why it happened and addressing those factors that led to it in the first place, and just stay positive through it. And realize, like, especially for me, I mean, I've had 3. I know other people have had a lot more, but take a step back and evaluate the factors that led to it so that you can hopefully prevent that again in the future.
It's very helpful, Sarah. Thank you. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up here today. But before we do sign off, Sarah, let people know if they're, well, first of all, if there's anyone else on your support system. You mentioned your coach that you want to shout out. Obviously, feel free. But for folks that want to stay tuned with, you know, what you're doing, your training, leading up to New York, what's the best way for them to keep up with you? I know you said the social media thing is new to you, but what's the best way for people to keep up?
Yeah, I definitely am now on Twitter and Instagram. So you said my Twitter handle is Sarah Who Sellers, and then my Instagram is Sarah Sellers. And yeah, I'm just I I won't post that often just because I don't like the idea of social media changing what you do in your life. I feel like so for me, if I'm trying to post all the time, it means that I'm restructuring my life to accommodate social media. Whereas I want social media for me to be just an authentic representation of like a snapshot of whenever I felt like taking a snapshot. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm going forward with it. And I'm just excited to have an opportunity to compete, and really just so grateful for the support that's been there before Boston and after Boston, for my family, my husband, definitely my coach. He's really puts in a lot of time and thought, and he's has incredible experience as a coach and as a runner. Pretty incredible support system.
Yeah, it's sweet. We often think of running as an individual sport, and every time we talk to professionals like yourself, we realize there really is a team behind it that makes an individual successful. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for the time. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for giving us a little peek into your story, your training, tons of valuable info. So very much appreciated. We're pumped to see you run in New York as well. It'll be the first time a lot of us will get to meet you in person here from UCAN. So really looking forward to that, and have a great training block until then.
All right. Thanks so much, Ryan.
All right. Thanks to everyone for joining us. We're signing off on Facebook Live. And if you want to catch this full conversation with Sarah, you can watch the entire thing back on our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/JenUCAN. For Sarah Sellers, I'm Varun Shriram. Take care, everyone. Thank you.